How's it going? And welcome back to the College Football Podcast. Today's episode is a loaded episode. We're going over win totals from the Big 12 and the SEC, head coach's hot seat, and much, much more. Let's get started. We're going to start with my SEC win totals, and I have them broken up into two different columns. First, we have the teams that are going over their win total. And then on the left side, the far side, is the teams that I think will go under their win total. So we're going to start with the teams that I think will pass over their win total. And the first one is Georgia. I know I skepticized Georgia a lot. They're set at 10 wins. I think they will go over that win total, and I will also be going over every SEC and Big 12 team's schedule today and giving you a firm record prediction after I do the SEC win totals. That is when you will get the SEC portion of the record predictions. But like I said, Georgia, I have them going over 10 wins. And I think it is very much possible that they get around 11 wins. I think they're only going to lose maybe 2 games this year. One being maybe to a team I'm going to talk about in a second in Texas. And then the other one maybe being to Clemson. But Georgia, I know over the last few years they've lost a few players. But I feel like Georgia, they reload. And now when they lose Carson Beck next year, they're still going to have another quarterback. That they're going to have a freshman, and then they're going to have Jaden Rashada, which I will talk about that later in the show on my stance and why I don't think Jaden Rashada made a good choice of where he's going to transfer to. But next, we got Texas, and they are also set at the same win total as Georgia, and that's 10 wins. I think Texas will go over 10 wins. Texas, for me, the two big games for Texas for me are Michigan and Georgia. If they could get past those 2 games and win and split or go 2-0, I think you could see Georgia in the SEC championship game in year 1 in the SEC. Next is LSU. They are set at 9.5 wins. And at 9 wins. And I think LSU will go over 9 wins. The only thing that would make me want to under 9 wins for LSU is they lost a lot. They lost Jaden Daniels. They lost Blake Neighbors. They lost Brian Thomas. But I believe in Garrett Nussmeier. I believe in the new quarterback they have coming in this year for LSU. And I think Brian Kelly has done a good job of recruiting. And I think that LSU is going to be just fine. Missouri set at 9.5 wins. I think they will go. Most people have them going under 9 wins. I don't see how you can have them going under 9 wins. I have the over here. They get Luther Burden comes back. Brady Cook comes back. Eli Drinkowitz got an extension. And I was very low on Missouri last year. I am not falling in that trap again. Not this year. I'm going to easily take the over. And there is a punishment in place here. If I get a win total wrong, 2026, I have to go to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and go to a Michigan football game and buy Michigan merch and say that Michigan's better than Ohio State for 2 weeks including the 5 or 6 days that I'm in Ann Arbor for. Next is Tennessee. They're also set at nine wins. And I think Tennessee goes over 9 wins. The only issue I have with Tennessee is, do we know how good Nico Uramiagavale is? Because he's only played 1 game. That is what could change my mind and make me go under. But I'm still going to stick with the over here on Tennessee's win total at 9.5, at 9, and go with the over. Next, we got Ole Miss. And I don't understand. Their win total is 9. I thought their win total should have been set at 10, like Texas and Georgia. But still, Lane Kiffin strikes again in the transfer portal. And Jackson Dart comes back. They did lose Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State, but they were able to replace him in the portal. And Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have the number 1 transfer portal class. So I like the over of 9 wins on Ole Miss. Alabama is next. And I've learned my lesson with Alabama fans. Never take the under and never put them lower than 10 in power rankings. And I have Alabama going over. Their win total set at 9.5. I have the over on Bama's win total of 9. I think Alabama will be fine. I think with Jalen Milroe coming back, they did lose Isaiah Bond to Texas, but I think with Milroe coming back, they will be fine. The one sliver of doubt I have for Alabama is their new coach, and that is Kalen DeBoer. How do I say this? I think DeBoer's a really good coach. I just need to see more consistency. Washington was good in the couple of years that he was there. Can he build off that success he had at Washington at Alabama? The next team is Texas A&M, and their win total is set at 8.5, which is 8 wins. I think in Mike Elko's first year as head coach at A&M, I think Texas A&M will get over 8 wins. And I know this might be me being skeptical, but I could see A&M finishing 2nd or 3rd in the SEC and winning over more than 8 games. Next is South Carolina, and their win total is set at a measly 5.5. To me, and I'm going to explain why here in a second, I think this is absurdly low for South Carolina. I think South Carolina's win total should have been at like 6.5, 7, or maybe even 7.5 wins. But for me, I'm taking the over on South Carolina's win total of 7.5. I mean, of 5.5, correction. I think South Carolina will win more than 5 games this year. In the last one, and this might be a surprise to everybody, it is Vanderbilt at 2.5 wins. I'm taking the over. I think Vandy will win more than 2 games. Now we get to the other side of the spectrum in the SEC, and that is the teams I don't think will match or make it to their win total. And the first one is Oklahoma at 7.5 wins. I think they're going to go under 7 wins, and it's just because it's their first year with Jackson Arnold as the starting quarterback, and I can see them. The offense isn't going to be the problem. I think it's going to be their defense. I know Brent Venables is a defensive head coach, but mark my words, I think that Oklahoma wins the last 7 games. You still make a bowl game. I don't know if they win that bowl game, but they will make a bowl game. The next one is Kentucky. Their win total is also set at 6.5. And I think Kentucky wins less than 6 games. And my theory here is they have another new quarterback, and it's Brock Vandagriff. And this will be his first year as a starting quarterback in college football. And I don't see, how do I say this? I don't see an avenue where I think Kentucky's offense will be good, but I don't know. There's not much tape out there on Brock Vandagriff because he barely played at Georgia. That is why he transferred to Kentucky, because he thought he was going to start there, and he probably will. Next is Florida. They are set at a just putrid 4.5 wins. I don't think Florida's going to get under 4. I think they win less than 4 games. And I may talk about Billy Napier on the head coach's hot seat for the SEC here in a minute. Just wait. But I don't think Florida's winning more than 4 games. Arkansas, they are set at 3.5 wins. I don't think they get that. I think Arkansas wins less than 3 games. And I think Sam Pittman's another guy you might see on the head coach's hot seat for the SEC. I think he might get fired. And that's just me. I think he might get let go. And then you've got Auburn. Their win total is set at 7.5. Originally, I had them going over their win total, but I can't see that happening now. And it's because of one main thing. It's Peyton Thorne. We've been through this experience before, Auburn fans, with Peyton Thorne at quarterback. It is not a good one. So I don't think Auburn will win more than 7 games. And the last one is Mississippi State. Their win total set at 4.5. And the only reason I think they win less than 4 games is because they have a new head coach and Jeff Lebby, offensive-minded head coach. But I think it might take a little bit of time for Mississippi State to gel on offense and the defense to get going. Now we get to my top 6 teams after spring football, post-spring in the SEC. At number 6 is Alabama. And I had mentioned how I like Jalen. I think Jalen Milroe is going to have a bounce-back season for Bama this year. He had a good year last year, but there were some mechanical quirks that I saw with Milroe that I think could be fixed, and I think they will be fixed. And Alabama fans, I think you're going to be happy with where I put Bama. At number 5 is Tennessee. And I was going to put Tennessee higher, but like I said earlier, if you want to go back about 4 to 5 minutes in the podcast, you can. I said Tennessee, the only issue I have with Tennessee is quarterback. Heupel's a really good head coach. I think he's going to get the best out of Nico that he can. That's what I'm going to be calling him because I don't know the correct way to pronounce his last name. But I think he's going to get the best out of Nico that he can. And I think Tennessee will be just fine. At number 4 is Missouri. Eli Drakowitz, I give him all the credit in the world. He took a Missouri team that won, I think, 3 games the year before last year. They got him 10 wins. They got him a bowl game win over Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Albeit, Ohio State played horrible. And I'm going to leave it at that. But Missouri, I think, is going to have a really good season this year. At number 3 is Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin knows how to pull in transfers. He is the transfer portal king. If you don't believe me, go look up the transfer portal rankings, and you will see that Ole Miss finished number 1 in the transfer portal the last 2 years. With Ole Miss, Jackson Dart's back, and I think Jackson Dart is going to have a huge year for Ole Miss. At number 2 is Texas. Steve Sarkisian got the best out of Quinn Ewers last year, and I think Quinn Ewers might be a top 3 contender for the Heisman. Look out for that in a future video. My Heisman list will be out when I do my top 25 preview and record award before the season. But I think Texas did get Isaiah Bond in the transfer portal. So, and and you will see here in a minute what I think Texas's record will be in 2024. At number 1 is Georgia. And Kirby Smart is a good head coach. And he knows how to recruit. I know I give him grief on taking players out of the portal or buying recruits. That's just because I like to give some SEC fans slander because they claim that the SEC is the best conference in college football. I mean, it is to an extent, but y'all need to work on scheduling. And before we get to the head coach's hot seat for the SEC, I will be going over every team's schedule and giving you a record prediction. Screen. So we are going to start with Georgia. Here is Georgia's schedule. So they open the season in a neutral site game August 31st at noon against Clemson. Now, personally, week 1 will be the game of the week. Clemson, Georgia. Originally, this was one of my upset picks, but I think Georgia, if you look at the spread and you look over the last few years, I think Georgia's going to beat the brakes off of Clemson. I think so. Georgia starts 1-0. So then they play Tennessee Tech at home. They're going to win that one very easily, so they're 2-0. Then they go to Kentucky. At Kentucky, I think they win that, so they're 3-0. Then they play at Alabama on September 28th. And this is one of Georgia's 3 big games this year. The other one would be Tennessee later in the season. I think this is where they take their first loss. So Georgia is now 3-1. They get back on track. They beat Auburn and they beat Mississippi State. So then you get to Texas. So Georgia is now 5-1 going into that Texas game. Let's say, for instance, Texas is undefeated going into that. So it's a 5-1 Georgia team versus a 6 or 5-0 Texas team. You bet your bottom dollar that game day will be at the Georgia-Texas game if both teams either are undefeated or one team has one loss and the other team is undefeated. I think this is where Georgia takes loss number 2 of the season. So Georgia's now 5-2 going into the Florida-Georgia game. I think they demolish the Gators. So they're now 6-2. Then they go to Oxford, Mississippi and play Ole Miss. I think they beat Ole Miss to go to 7-2. They lose to Tennessee at home to go to 7-3. They beat UMass 8-3 and beat Georgia Tech 9-3. So Georgia goes 9-3. Next, we will get to Texas is probably still over. We need to go over to the Big 12. Texas schedule. So Texas starts the year at home against Colorado State on ESPN on Saturday, August 31st at 3:30. I think Texas is going to win that game easily. So they're 1-0. Their first big game of the year is week 2 at the Big House in Ann Arbor. I think they beat Michigan. So they're 2-0. Then they play UTSA. I think that's a win. So they start 3-0. They're going to start 4-0 after they beat Louisiana Monroe. They will start 5-0 after beating Mississippi State. Then they have the Red River Showdown with Oklahoma. I think they lose to Oklahoma, so they're now 5-1. Then they play Georgia, and they beat Georgia to go to 6-1. Then they get Vanderbilt. They will win. That's a win, so they're 7-1. Then they play Florida, 8-1. 9-1 after they beat Arkansas. And then Kentucky, 9-1 after they beat Kentucky. And 10-1 after they beat Texas A&M. So I think realistically Texas is going to go 10-1. Next, we've got Texas, which is big. That's LSU. Now we get to LSU's schedule. So LSU starts the season in Vegas against USC on Sunday, September 1st, 7:30. I think this is going to be a really good game. Do I think LSU wins? Yes. I think LSU is going to win. So they're 1-0. Then they play Nicholls. They're going to be 2-0 after that game. Then they they jump into SEC play. And they play at South Carolina. They go to Williams-Brice in South Carolina. I think they beat South Carolina. So they're 3-0. They play UCLA at home. I think they win that, so they're 4-0. They play South Alabama at home. That's going to be a win. So they're 5-0. Then they go back into SEC play and play Ole Miss. I think they lose. So they're now 5-1. Then they play Arkansas on the road. That's a win. 6-1. At Texas A&M, 6-2. That's a loss. At Alabama, that's a loss. 6-3. They beat Florida, beat Vanderbilt, so they're 7-3. Actually, wait. So they were 5-0. Actually, I think they beat Ole Miss, so they're 6-0 going into the Arkansas game. They're 7-0 after beating Arkansas, 7-1 after beating A&M. I'm gonna have them beating Alabama, so they're 8-1. They're 9-1 after beating Florida. 9-2 after losing to Vanderbilt. And 10-2 after beating Oklahoma. So LSU goes 10-2. Now we got Bama next. And Bama fans, don't be surprised week 2 with your schedule if I give you a loss. So week 1, Alabama plays Western Kentucky at home. I think they start 1-0 after beating Western Kentucky. Week 2, here's my explanation. I know this is a home game. Are you going to be able to get up and play like you played last year? Hopefully you put up more points. I think I really want to give you a loss, but I think you beat South Florida. So you're 2-0. Then you got a big game at Wisconsin. I think you beat Wisconsin. So you're 3-0 going into the Georgia game. You lose to Georgia. So you're 3-1 now. Then you go to Vanderbilt. That's going to be a win, so you're 4-1. Then you come home for South Carolina. That's a win. 6-1. Then you go to Tennessee. I think Tennessee's going to beat you, so you're 6-2. You get Missouri the next week. And I think you lose to Missouri. So you're 6-3. You're going to be 7-3. No, 6-4 after you lose to LSU. 7-4 after beating Mercer. 8-4 after beating Oklahoma. And 9-4 after beating Auburn. So Alabama's record for me going into this year is going to be 9-4. Next on the docket is Missouri. So Missouri starts the year out with, I'm going to say they start the year 2-0. They beat Murray State and they beat Buffalo. Now, Boston College for me, originally I had them losing to Boston College. I think with the new head coach for BC, I think Missouri beats Boston College. So Missouri is now 3-0. They will be 4-0 after beating Vanderbilt. Then they go to College Station, and I believe I haven't done A&M yet. Done Texas. I have them beating Texas A&M. So they're now 6-0. Then they go to Massachusetts. I have them beating UMass 7-0. Auburn beating Auburn 8-0. Losing to Alabama 8-1. beating Oklahoma 9-1, losing to South Carolina 9-2, beating Mississippi State 10-2, and beating Arkansas 11-2. So Missouri's record is 11-2. Next team we're going over the record is going to be Ole Miss. So Ole Miss starts the season with Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern. I think they will start this season 4-0. So then they get into SEC play. And they play Kentucky at home. I think they win that, so they're 5-0. Then they go to South Carolina and LSU. I think they're going to split. I think they they beat South Carolina and lose to LSU. So they're 7-1 going into the Oklahoma game. Do they beat Oklahoma? I think they have a really good chance of beating Oklahoma. So they're 8-1. Then they beat Arkansas 9-1. 9-2 after they lose to Georgia. 10-2 after they beat the Gators. And 11-2 after they win the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Tennessee is the next team up. Let's get their record. Their schedule pulled up. Correction. So Tennessee, they start the year with Chattanooga. That's a win. NC State. I like what NC State did in the portal, but I don't think it's going to be enough to beat Tennessee. So they're now 2-0. Kent State. That's going to be a win. So they're 3-0. They go into the Oklahoma game undefeated. Do they come out of the Oklahoma game undefeated? I don't think so. So they're 3-1. Actually, no, I think they do. So they're 4-0. They're going to be 5-0 after they beat Arkansas and 6-0 after they beat Florida. So then you get Alabama at home. I had Tennessee. I have Tennessee losing to, I believe it's losing to Alabama. And you can correct me if I said Tennessee was going to beat Alabama, because I don't think Tennessee does. So Tennessee's now 6-1. They get back on the winning track after beating Kentucky 7-1. 8-1 after beating Mississippi State. 8-2 after losing to Georgia. Then they went out their last 2 games to go. They beat UTEP 9-2 and 10-2 after they beat Vandy. So Tennessee goes 10-2. Next, we have Texas A&M. And here's Texas A&M schedule. So week 1, they play at home against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to be a good team, but I think A&M wins, so they're 1-0. They get McNeese the next week. That's going to be an easy one, hopefully. So 2-0. They beat Florida 3-0, beat Bowling Green 4-0. They beat Arkansas. So they beat Bowling Green to go to 4-0, beat Arkansas to go to 5-0. Now you get Missouri. They lose to Missouri, so they're now 5-1. Beat Mississippi State 6-1. Lose to LSU 7-1. Beat South Carolina. Lose to South Carolina 7-2. Beat New Mexico State 8-2, beat Auburn 9-2, and lose to Texas 9-3. So Texas A&M will go 9-3 in 2024. Next, we've got Auburn. Should be a doozy. I'm not going to make friends with a lot of Auburn fans. You start week 1 at home against Alabama A&M. I think that's a win. Then Cal's got to travel across the country to Auburn, Alabama, and play Auburn. I think Auburn wins that, so they're 2-0. They're going to start 3-0 after beating New Mexico, 4-0 after beating Arkansas. So then you get to Oklahoma. I think they lose to Oklahoma, so they're 4-1. Lose to Georgia 4-2. Lose to Missouri 4-3. Beat Kentucky 5-3. Beat Vanderbilt 6-3. Somehow I think you beat Louisiana Monroe 7-3. But then you lose 7-4. You lose to Auburn. You lose to Texas A&M 7-5 after losing to Bama. So I know I said earlier that Auburn was going to go under. I still think that is under because you're losing to A&M and you're losing to Alabama. Next up on the docket is Kentucky. No, Oklahoma's next. Oklahoma's 7 wins under. So Oklahoma is next. And why don't we pull up the Big 12 and go to Oklahoma schedule. So Oklahoma starts the year at home against Temple. That's going to be an easy win. Then they go at home against Houston. I think they win that, so they're 2-0. Tulane, to me, is a difficult game for them, but I think they beat Tulane, so they're 3-0 going into the Tennessee game. They come out of the Tennessee game undefeated. They beat Tennessee to go to 4-0. They will go to 5-0. No. Yes, 5-0 after beating Auburn. They beat Texas 6-0. Lose to South Carolina 6-1. Lose to Ole Miss 6-2. Beat Maine 7-2. Lose to Missouri 7-3. Lose to Alabama 7-4, and lose to LSU 7-5. Next is Kentucky. So Kentucky's schedule. Kentucky starts the year at home against Southern Miss. They beat Southern Miss to go to 1-0. Then the second game of the year, they play South Carolina. I think they lose to South Carolina, so they're 1-1. Then they lose to Georgia 1-2. Beat Ohio 2-2. Lose to Ole Miss 2-3. Beat Vanderbilt 3-3. Beat Florida 4-3. Beat Auburn 5-3. Lose to Tennessee 5-4. Beat Murray State 6-4. Lose to Texas 6-5, and lose to Louisville 6-6. So Kentucky goes 6-6 and goes. Technically, they do go under. Next, we've got South Carolina. Let's see how I feel about South Carolina. So South Carolina, they start the year at home August 31st against Old Dominion. That's going to be a win. Then they play Kentucky. I think they beat Kentucky, so they're 2-0. They're going to lose to LSU 2-1, beat Akron 3-1. They lose to Ole Miss 3-2, lose to Alabama 3-3, lose to Oklahoma 3-4, lose to A&M 3-5, beat Vanderbilt 4-5, lose to Missouri 4-6, beat Wofford 5-6, and beat Clemson 6-6. So I think South Carolina goes 6-6. Now we're down to Arkansas. We're down to the bottom barrel of the SEC. So Arkansas is next. Where is Arkansas? Right there. So Arkansas, they start the year against Arkansas Pine Bluff. I think they win that game 1-0. They play at Oklahoma State. That's going to be a loss. So they're 1-1. At UAB, loss. At home against UAB, loss. 1-2. Auburn, loss. 1-3. A&M, loss. 1-4. Tennessee, loss. 1-5. LSU, lost 1-6. And I think if they lose to LSU, I think that might be where you hear the name Sam Pittman has been fired. Then they beat Mississippi State, so they're 2-6. Then they lose to Ole Miss 2-7. Lose to Texas 2-8. Beat Louisiana Tech 3-8. And lose to Missouri 3-9. So Arkansas goes 3-9. Next is Florida. And Florida fans, I don't know how to feel. Let's take a look at your schedule. You start the year versus Miami. Right off rip, I'm going to say that's a loss. There is no way you're beating Miami. Absolutely no way. Then you play Stanford at home. You're going to be 1-1. Then you play Texas A&M. That's a loss. So you're 1-2. Then you play Mississippi State at Mississippi State. You'll probably win that game, so you're 2-2. Then you go to UC. You play UCF at home. That's going to be a loss. UCF's going to be good. So now you're 2-3. Then you play Tennessee on the road. That's a loss, 2-4. Unless somehow you beat Tennessee, which I highly doubt you do. So you're 2-4. Beat Kentucky, 3-4. Lose to Georgia, 3-5. Lose to Texas, 3-6. Lose to LSU, 3-7. Lose to Ole Miss, 3-8. And maybe, just maybe, you beat Florida State, but I doubt it. So 3-9. And to me, I'm being too generous to you, Florida. Way too generous. Sorry, Florida fans. Mississippi State is the next team up on the docket for a record prediction. Mississippi State, they start the year at home against Eastern Kentucky. That's a win, so they're 1-0. I can see them starting 3-0. Beating Eastern Kentucky, beating Arizona State, beating Toledo. Then you go to Florida. Florida comes to you. You're going to lose to Florida, so that's 3-1. Lose to Texas 3-2. Lose to Georgia 3-3. Lose to A&M 3-4. 3-4. 3-5. Yeah, 3-4. Lose at home against Arkansas 3-5. Beat UMass 4-5. Lose to Tennessee 3-6. Lose to Missouri 3-7, and lose at Mississippi at Ole Miss 3-9. So Mississippi State goes 3-9 in its first year under Jeff Lebby. And the last team is Vanderbilt. For the SEC record prediction. So they start the year at home against Virginia Tech. I think they beat Virginia Tech in Alcorn State and Georgia State. So they're 3-0. But I think they lose to Missouri, lose to Alabama. Somehow I think they're going to lose to Kentucky. So they're now 3-3. They beat Ball State 4-3. Lose to Texas 4-4. Lose to Auburn 4-5. Lose to LSU. Lose to South Carolina 4-6. 4-7 after you lose to LSU, and 4-8 after you lose against Tennessee. So Vanderbilt does get over 2 wins. I think they win 4 games and go 4-8. And now we get to SEC coaches hot seat post spring. And it is going to be, it's Billy Napier at number 3. His seat is very hot. Clark Lee, Vanderbilt, burning hot. And Sam Pittman on fire. Hold up, ladies and gentlemen. Let me do something here. Let me update this. 2 seconds. Okay, now we're good. Now I can pull it back up. Present. I know we're doing that midstream, but I want to make sure it's right because I had something on there twice. Here we go. Big 12 win totals. We've got Kansas State over 9 wins. Over 9 wins, 8 wins for Kansas. Over 8 for Texas Tech. Arizona over 7.5. UCF over 7.5. West Virginia over 6.5. Colorado over 5.5. Oklahoma State under 7.5. I'm willing to take the bet on that. Iowa State under 7.5. TCU under 7.5. Cincinnati under 5.5. Baylor under 5.5. Arizona State under 4.5 wins. BYU under 4.5. And Houston under 4.5. Now, we need to pull up again. Schedules, and we go Big 12. Or are we going to do that? So, the other thing I wanted to talk about here was Jaden Rashada of originally Arizona State, but now he's at Georgia. I still, and I've said this 2 or 3 times on the podcast. I don't get why Rashada chose to go to Georgia over somewhere else where baby started, like a Michigan, like a Forest, maybe Georgia Tech. Why did he choose to go to some school where he's not going to start year one and not being Georgia? Because Georgia's got Carson Beck. I don't get it. And then I don't know who Michigan's starting quarterback is going to be still. Is he going to be Alex Orji or is he going to be somebody else? But we do offer, I can tell you one thing we do offer here with the with the college football podcast. We offer memberships. And I would highly recommend purchasing a membership as it helps grow the college football / sports talk podcast family. And also, please remember to subscribe to this channel. But that will wrap up today's episode of the college football podcast. I will see y'all back here on Thursday with another episode of the college football podcast. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.